everyone. Thanks for joining. We have several attendees filing in, so I'll give it a minute or so. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'll be starting in just a minute here, but if you're looking for the back to school webinar with Hypothesis, you're in the right place, and we'll start in just a minute. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. We have some people still joining us, but for the sake of time, I'll kick us off. This webinar is our Hypothesis Back to School webinar, Tips to Build Engaged Future Ready Classrooms. And thank you so much. We will have information both for new users, if you've never used the tool before. I will be showing a little bit about what social annotation looks like in your LMS. And then we'll really dig into the content of the presentation as far as classroom pedagogy. So our webinars are or can be quite large, and for that reason, we use the Q&A section in the bottom navigation bar. We're a really small team, and this just helps us keep track of all the questions. We do try to answer every single question that is posed in these webinars. So if you do have a question, do use your Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom navigation bar. And with that said, if you want to try out that feature, the Q&A feature, feel free to introduce yourself, and I'll keep an eye on the comments and introductions that come up. Most specifically, it can be really helpful for me to know if we have people new to the tool or not. So feel free to share your experience with Hypothesis there as well. And there is also closed captioning enablement option in the same area in Zoom. So check that out if you need that. My name is Jessica George. I'm the Customer Success Manager from Hypothesis. I support schools west of the Mississippi in North America. And my colleague, Brian Malone, you may recognize his name if you're on the East Coast and are at a Hypothesis school. So I conduct workshops, facilitate webinars like these ones, and I also offer one-to-one faculty support. So feel free to get in touch anytime and I can help you set up the tool if you are a new user. And Peter, tips for Google Drive. Okay, sounds good. I'll cover that as I do my demo. So thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's get started. This is the agenda for today. I will be doing a short demo, and remind me if I forget to mention Google Drive there. And in that space, I'll also be discussing what social annotation is and why you might use it in your classroom. The heart of this webinar, though, is really centered around three pillars. The first is how social annotation can boost student outcomes, how you can use it to navigate the AI era, and how social annotation can be used to support workforce readiness. So we'll look at some different specific examples, including assignment ideas that relate to those different pillars. Then I'll offer some more generalized information about getting started in the classroom and a short closing. But if there are questions that come up for you throughout these slides, feel free to drop those into Q&A, and I will try to address those during the presentation. And if I'm not able to answer those immediately, I have a team member helping me on the back end, and they'll reach out to our other teams if I'm not able to do so on the call here. So let's go ahead and dive into the conversation. So first things first, for those of you new to the tool, what does it look like to annotate with hypothesis? We like to say that hypothesis makes reading active, visible, and social. So you're probably familiar with this idea of marking up a physical textbook with underlines, questions, comments, ideas that you want to either return to yourself or maybe bring to a group that is reading the book or other text with you. Hypothesis is moving that kind of cognitive work to the digital space. Here is an example of what the tool looks like. So I am showing on my screen a PDF that has been set up in my LMS. So this tool is available across LMSs, so Canvas, Blackboard, D12, Brightspace, Moodle, and so on. And once the tool is set up, it will look like this no matter what LMS you're using. In the middle, there will be the PDF or the other file type that you are working with. And then layered over that is what we call the annotation sidebar. So in this area where my cursor is moving, we see various different annotation cards. And inside of the annotation card is highlighted text. You can think of this as text you might underline if you are using a pencil in a book. The comment that the person annotating has made in response to that text that's been highlighted. And in some cases, tags at the bottom of these comments that really help users search for and sort different types of annotation types. If they are wanting to look for instance, every annotation with the tag review, tagging that with this word will allow them to do that. And I'll get into what that means in a little bit here. So these are our annotation cards, and we can see how threaded discussions can unfold from these top level annotations. In order to make an annotation, students can select text, select annotate, and then add their comment to the annotation card here. There's some simple styling options, including an option to tag another person that's a member of class into your particular thread. And this is where we would also offer our tags. So I'll add my test annotation tag there. I will then post either to my small reading group or my class, depending on how my instructor has set up my assignment. And from here, everyone who is a part of either my small group or my class can see the brilliant comment that I've made here. So this is um, different than traditional discussion boards because the thoughts that students are sharing are anchored to specific points in the text. So if you are looking for a strategy to get students to actually open their text and make comments on top of what they are reading, this will be a helpful tool for you. I know that in traditional discussion boards, students sometimes become siloed from their actual readings. And from there, that temptation to overly rely on generative AI to create prompt answers for them, that's where that can kind of grow from this division from the reading itself. So this can be a great strategy for returning students back to their actual readings. I'm going to jump into Q&A just to check to see if there's anything that needs answering there. All right. Perfect. Feel free to share as questions arise. So a few other notes about the annotation sidebar that I want to mention before we move on here. There's different options to hide the annotation sidebar and highlights. So if your students are wanting to take a first pass of the reading without the annotations visible, they may do that. There's also an option for page notes. So if a student is wanting to make an annotation that may not necessarily be clearly linked to a specific sentence or phrase, but it's an idea that they want to share anyway, they can use this page notes feature, which will offer a kind of floating annotation in the page notes tab. This is an area where some instructors will leave their annotation and instructions as well. And then you'll notice that in this PDF example, there is also a little rectangle or square and a pin. And these are the features that will allow you to make image annotations. So if you've used Hypothesis before, but it's been maybe last year or before this summer, you may not be aware that we just released our image annotation tool. And this allows students and instructors to leave annotations directly on top of a visual text that's a part of the PDF that has been loaded into the hypothesis assignment. So there's two options for this image annotation feature. The first is rectangle annotation, which allows us to select a large portion of the text and make our annotation on top of that. Depending on your requirements for your class, you can also ask that students leave an alt text description here. And there is also some support documentation for students wanting to learn how to write alt text and pair that with their analytical annotation. So that was the rectangle annotation option for image annotation. The other option for image annotation is the pin drop feature, which allows us to pin a specific point of the visual chart or graph, so on, and direct students' attention to that specific point on the visual text. The image annotation feature will also present the surrounding area in the annotation card there. But the main part of the annotation card for image annotation functions the same as regular text annotation. So there's lots of creative ways to use these different features, but you can see how this can be a great tool to support both visual analysis and close reading, really directing students' attention to those critical skills that we want them to be practicing in our college classrooms. And so let me answer two questions specific to assignment setup. So there's one open question. When we use hypothesis, is it connected to the whole class, or can you make sure the annotations are based off assigned groups? So Jennifer, since you're a Canvas user, I'll bring up where you would set up those Canvas groups. So every LMS is going to have an area of the classroom space where you can set up students in groups based on the LMS group feature. In Canvas, it's located under People. In other areas, it's located in other places. But the idea here is as long as your LMS has a group option, you can pull those small groups that you've set up in your course into the hypothesis assignment setup. During that assignment setup, that is also where you will see options to use Google Drive links, as an earlier participant had a question about. And as long as those Google Drive links are um, publicly available, so you've made it shareable, you can pull those Google Drive PDFs into the assignment setup. And there's a question, does image annotation work for actual visual images too? Yes, so the only supported file type at this time is PDFs. So if you're able to convert your images into PDFs or convert for instance, PowerPoint that has images inside of it and save that as a PDF, those are all available for image annotation. The product team is working on rolling out other specific image file types like JPEG and so on. But right now, it has to be presented in the PDF file type. So if you're looking for a more kind of visual studies, art kind of example, this is our cat example. And we have different instances of image annotation here where students are highlighting specific portions of the painting and asking questions about those, both with the rectangular select and pin drop. And you can see here how the distinction between alt text and analytical annotation becomes clear it might be hard to see on your screen here, but we have an example of the selection kind of hovering over this bird-like feature. The alt text says an image of a bird placed on the forehead of a cat, so on. And then we have the questions about the visual text presented in the main part of the annotation card. All great questions. I'm not going to go into specific assignment setup because it's a little different across LMSs, but feel free to get in touch with me and I can schedule a one-on-one demo for you. We also have a lot of resources on our YouTube channel and our educator resources page if you're looking for quick 5-minute setup in your LMS. All right, so getting back to our slides here, just a quick review that you can make your readings annotatable, as I showed, through various different LMSs. And a big distinction here between the Hypothesis social annotation tool and other tools is that this tool operates through single sign-on in your LMS. So once the assignment is set up by you in your LMS platform, students aren't registering for a different account. They simply launch the reading that you've created in your LMS and they can go straight into annotating. So that's really nice for both beginning of semester setup and then also if you're wanting to try this tool mid-semester, they don't have to create a different account or anything like that. They can just dive straight into the reading that you've assigned. All right, now let's transition into some pedagogy ideas. Why use social annotation in your courses? So these are 3 main takeaways that I want to go through today. Boosting student outcomes, navigating the AI era, and advancing workforce readiness. And we'll begin with student outcomes. So through this tool, we're really trying to emphasize that reading is an ongoing process. When students use ChatGPT and similar tools to quote unquote read or obtain a summary of the reading, they may end up seeing reading as more of a product-oriented process that the machine can provide to them. There's a quick distillation that happens, and then some sort of limited summary that they can kind of improvise with in class discussion. Um, in that way, they really lose out on the different habits of mind that they'll practice with the activity of close reading, including the different ideas that surface when you are reading a text in conversation with other students and instructors. So this tool can really help reorient reading in that way, showing students how they themselves are knowledge creators when they are participating in reading activities. So I like to mention that. And I also like to note that some faculty will even have students cite annotation discussions in more summative type assignments. For instance, perhaps there's a great analysis from a classmate that occurred in a couple of readings prior. A student is working on a more formal essay, and they cite that idea from their peer as part of the essay requirement. So there's a lot of creative ways to integrate the annotation discussions, not just in the reading activities themselves, but in later projects that you're having students undertake further on in the term. So we like to emphasize incorporating student knowledge. These are also conversations where students can create or share relationships between the text and their own personal experience or other subject matter content that they've come across in other classes, really encouraging peer-to-peer learning and an opportunity for students to share ideas in a less formal way. We're not expecting paragraph length annotations. We're really trying to emphasize conversational interactions with peers in a more informal feeling type discussion. So as I get started here, clearing out a few of my windows, let's see. I do like to note this idea of social annotation and self-efficacy. So we have a really interesting case study on the site that explores how social annotation supports students' feelings of self-efficacy, their belief that they can not only finish a reading task, but successfully complete other learning tasks in a course and apply that knowledge in authentic learning contexts once they have moved beyond that particular course. So we see that students using social annotation, practicing social annotation, feel increased confidence in their ability to achieve academically and otherwise, increased motivation to help others, and an increased sense of influence on course conversation. So kind of this feeling that a student's own presence matters to the course that they're in. So if you're struggling with student attendance or more quieter discussions, participation issues, this could be a strategy to try and see if that helps your course. We also find that hypothesis sustains student engagement 5 times longer on texts. So basically, students who are doing social annotation work return to their e-texts more frequently throughout the term. And this is the case study that I mentioned earlier. So this specific case study is looking at student success in the sciences. And there are some really interesting findings there related to student persistence in STEM fields. So feel free to check out our case studies area in the Hypothesis website for more on that. And dipping back into chat or Q&A here to see if there's any questions. Okay, great. So now the next area of the classroom that I wanted to explore today is navigating the AI era, sorry. So one great benefit of social annotation is that it allows you to really mark up a text as we saw earlier. And I'll just show this again. So a student, again, will highlight a piece of text, select annotate, and then offer their comment, or in this case, in the case of AI, critique of the text that's generated. So if you are looking for ways to explore AI critical literacy, you might have students critique AI generated text using social annotation. Some of the assignment ideas that faculty have shared with us is perhaps um, they generate a history of their own field or of a specific concept that they're discussing in class, and they will load that as a hypothesis reading and have students both critique what is missing from the text that's been generated from AI, but then also bring in the external references from other readings earlier in the unit or earlier in the course, really allowing students to shape, correct, augment the AI's own presentation of the material. This is going to really encourage critical thinking and fact checking while also not kind of shying away from the ubiquity of AI in higher ed right now. So as we think about AI, here are some other ideas for starter assignments. You might just have students critique ChatGPT's writing style and form. So this could be kind of taking a look at where things get super generic, what sorts of phrases do, or other sorts of kind of styling patterns do we notice ChatGPT and other generative AI tools making, and how might we kind of humanize that sort of writing, if we want to call it that. Um, Students as fact checkers. This is along the line of the idea I shared earlier in the previous slide, but creating a bibliography, fact checking ChatGPT's work. This could be an interesting idea to pair with the annotated bibliography that students sometimes do in composition classes and so on. And then uh, kind of having students think about themselves as content experts now that they've been through, a specific unit or a large portion of your class. Can they analyze the accuracy of the ChatGPT produced content? And again, we have some starter assignments on our website that you are free to check out and adapt as you see fit. The third pillar that we'll talk about today is supporting workforce readiness. So many faculty come to a hypothesis thinking that since it's a tool for reading, it might only be relevant for humanities type classes. So those are classes that usually do a lot of reading. Faculty might be struggling to get students to read in those classes. So great fit. And while that's true, hypothesis can also be really helpful for courses that fall outside of those sorts of disciplines, for instance, career and technical education, health sciences, and so on. So let's take a look at some ideas here. So one common way I see nursing faculty using this tool is to have students practice different skills of noticing, interpreting, responding, and reflecting along the lines of this Tanner's clinical judgment model. So maybe they will load a case study as the primary text that students are exploring and ask students to tag different annotations with these different skills or share how they would um, see these different skills being practiced by the person described in the case study. So here's an example of what that might look like. I have a health case study loaded from an OER textbook. And then me acting as a student is sharing questions and comments that fit into those different steps of the judgment model there. So those are some real world examples that students and skills that students can practice with the tool through this critical reading process. Um, in law, along the similar lines, faculty will find social annotation helpful for supporting the casebook method. So thinking about close reading skills, the processes of synthesis, thinking about a case's real world impact, including this discussion of shared annotations and bringing those along into in-class discussion and so on. So we have actually examples from a different workshop. If you are interested, feel free to reach out to our success team, and I can provide you with some more specific examples related to a casebook method. But as far as digging into close reading skills, I like to show this slide, which shows what this type of activity might look like in practice. So in the case of law or really any discipline that's using some sort of theoretical paradigm to close read a text, you might have students apply those and communicate that they're able to tell the distinction between different interpretation types in their annotations. You can have them provide external context on top of existing text in the reading. And here is where that metacognitive tagging might come into play, asking students to identify different types of generic elements present in different reading types. So just some examples there, and then a few more. Clarifying key concepts with external resources. Students are able to provide external links, videos, and images in these annotation cards. So if you find bringing in multimedia is helpful for student engagement, that can also be an assignment opportunity for you. And then finally, analyzing a presented solution or strategy. So these are all things that we do in class discussion, and that we want students to be doing as they're reading, but social annotation can help make these practices more explicit for students. Someone in the Q&A asks, is there a way for annotations to be made by students without it being shared with the group? And the answer to that is yes. It requires group setup. So what we would do is we would split students into groups of one. So for instance, if you use Canvas, you'll assign each student to a group of one where they're just working in their own individual group. And that allows you to make comments back to them on their reading without it becoming a social conversation with the rest of a small reading group or the entire class. So keep in mind that the default for this tool is that everyone can see everyone else's annotations. Everyone in the group can see your annotations unless you have subdivided reading groups into smaller class discussion groups, or as the participant just mentioned, groups of one for those types of individual reading activities. So let's see. I also want to get into some more general classroom ideas here. So let's take a look at those. So if you're interested in getting started but aren't sure how to approach this in your own class, and maybe you have a term like a 10-week course that hasn't yet started for the fall, this can be a great kind of entry point for you and your students, just starting by annotating the syllabus. So you can load a syllabus as a PDF document, as a Google Drive file or OneDrive file, and have students annotate your course policies or offer comments upon your reading list. And if you have a generative AI policy that you want to make sure students read, perhaps you require that they annotate it. So there's different ways of approaching this annotating the syllabus activity. This is a great way to set expectations for your course. So it can present to students your ethos, your classroom ethos. You want students to be feel welcome enough to ask you questions and ask about course policy before it's too late, I would say. And it also is offering them a chance to try out the annotation toolbar and get a feel for what just the technical practice of it will look like later on, before you get to those more serious type readings for the course. Another way to think about social annotation is as a way to guide your students through the text. So I've mentioned a lot about students' own interactions with their reading, but you can see how this tool would allow you to highlight particular portions of the text that you know they're going to have questions about and offer clarity beforehand if it's not something that you want them on their own to be working through. Maybe there are more important points that you know they should be focusing on. So that can be a nice way to think about social annotation as well, kind of support for your students. Another way to think about academic reading and social annotation is it can allow you as the instructor to signpost specific generic conventions that students might not be used to. For instance, maybe they are reading a scientific report for the first time. They're not used to different section headers and titles. Why is, such and such being presented before, the next section, that sort of a thing. So you can kind of explain these things in your own annotations in that way. Alternately, if you are working with students who seem already confident with your course material, confident with making annotations and so on, you can think about leaving social annotation up for more of a seminar style activity. So maybe you don't leave any annotations at all as an instructor before they get to the reading, and you kind of see where the discussion flows from the student's own interest as it develops as they move through the text over the course of the week or so. So this can be a great way for thinking about student guided reading. If you want to make sure that you are covering portions of the text that really interest your students, maybe you just see what seems to be stickiest for them in their own annotations. And just remembering that the reading is open for questions, sharing resources, sharing connections to other texts, and so on. So again, really providing that space for knowledge co-creation and practicing the metacognitive practices involved with close reading. I mentioned earlier in my breakdown of different annotation types that this can be a great way to have students practice skills related to problem solving or identifying different theoretical applications. But I just like to review that. So again, this tool is not just handy for those humanities classes, but it is definitely a way where students can clarify notation and syntax in their STEM courses, translate technical passages, and so on. So here is an example of what that might look like on a STEM text. So we have a student, for instance, asking about different notation features, translating technical passages in their math course. So other ways of using social annotation apart from more traditional type course readings. So you can have students annotate course documents like the syllabus, but also annotation can be used for assignment instructions, study guides, and so on, really allowing students to ensure they understand the task at hand before they get started on one of those more final projects for your course term. So before we wrap up here, I did want to just show a couple of other file type options that were not included in the slide deck. So of course we have our readings. We also have a YouTube video function as well as Canvas Studio if you are a Canvas user. And what the YouTube video function will do is you can grab a YouTube link, include it in a hypothesis assignment, and the tool will grab the transcript that is relayed by YouTube, and students can annotate over the transcript. So if you are looking for support not only with reading type texts, but video texts or podcasts, this could also support student understanding of those materials as well. So I just thought I would mention that before I dive back into my slides here. So any other questions coming up for any folks before I wrap up things here? All right. Um, and Alexandria, so Hypothesis will not generate the transcript. If you're a Canvas user, you can pass the video through Canvas Studio and then use a Canvas Studio created transcript in that way. Yeah. And for those of you, um, let's see, for those of you teaching larger classes, gotcha. Yeah, so then in that situation, you would definitely need to ensure that the YouTube video has a transcript. Yep. So on the slide here, a few other additions that we didn't dive very deeply into today, but I'm happy to explore with you if you are a current user. So uh, you may know that we have a web extension option, and some of the people that I've talked to, will ask me, why would I need a LMS subscription? But the LMS subscription comes with a lot more features that are really helpful to you in the classroom context. So this is going to include things like auto grading, which allows a participation type grading feature. And this is great for larger classes where maybe it's not practical for you to be looking at every single student's annotation for quality every single week. So that's a great feature that is available to you with an LMS subscription. And then reporting dashboards, this will tell you the level of activity and engagement across students, across courses. So that can be really nice for kind of a bird's eye view of the type of reading work that students are doing for your course. At mentions, again, students can tag each other in the LMS, and the assignment, again, can be accessed by students through their single sign-on in their LMS, which is really handy. So I'm going to get to some of the Q&A here. Um, we don't we don't have a Canopy integration at this time. So unless the video is available through Canvas Studio, and I'm not sure that that is a thing with Canopy at this time, we wouldn't be able to use Canopy with social annotation. Is there a way students can place a summary and reflection of the reading in Hypothesis as a submission? Um, Darla, that's a really good question. So the thing that comes to mind for me, and I'll just load a different reading here, is page notes. So if students maybe were annotating collaboratively as a class and you wanted everyone to leave kind of an exit ticket, I do see faculty using page notes in that way. So they'll have students leave, a final thought that's maybe not tied directly to a specific point in the text in the page notes area. Um, Apart from Hypothesis itself, I know that other faculty will have students summarize what they found interesting about the discussion in a separate type of more traditional file upload assignment if they're wanting to ensure that the student really read through all of their classmates' annotations. So that could be another way to augment and offer students a place for summary and reflection there. And yes, there is a pilot version, so that would be a question for our team here, and I may be able to answer it with a couple of the slides coming up. So sit tight. So I did want to give a shout out to our partner workshop series. So we dive deeper into these topics in our learning labs every Thursday. So if you are interested in getting deeper into the idea of digital reading and social annotation, I'll be presenting at our learning lab our workshop, Social Annotation for Digital Reading in the Age of AI. We really get into different concepts related to digital reading and social annotation's role in that process. And then we also have some more beginner type workshops coming up in October as well, including activating annotation in your LMS. So if you're looking for a deeper dive just in terms of setup and individual features, that would be a great workshop to sign up for. If you are an existing user but want to know more about some of the new features that I mentioned in passing today, do check out our new features workshop in mid-October. All right, here. All right. We also have a Social Learning Innovators Awards nomination that is now open. So if you have any colleagues or if you yourself really are an active user of Hypothesis social annotation and would like to share your findings, do feel free to nominate yourself or your colleagues for this award. We're always looking to learn about the ways that you are using this in your real classrooms. Um, any plans for workforce career readiness workshop webinars in the future? Um, I will have to look at our November calendar, but we do plan to incorporate those as one of our primary pillars for our tool in the coming year. So keep an eye out on our workshops page, and you may see something pop up very soon. So thanks for that question. If you're interested in trying out the tool, feel free to get in touch at education@hypothesis.is, including questions about piloting. So we have discounts and no cost implementation. So feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about any of these promotional aspects. And we have our QR code here as well. So again, the email for that is education@hypothesis.is. So it was great having you all here. I'll stay on in case any last questions come through the Q&A. And thank you so much. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me about pedagogy or assignment setup and so on. So thank you all and have a great rest of your week. And all right. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll go ahead and close things out here. Yes, this is recorded, and I believe we're sending out the recording, or it'll be available on our YouTube channel if you missed anything or want to share with a colleague. Yep. All right. Thanks all. Have a great week.